Hey everyone, George here. Welcome back to the Art of Water. Today we're going to be talking about a fish that I think it's really important to have in every fish tank. And they come in all different kinds. I think there's over 100 and I think there's 110 varieties last time I checked. And it's really interesting because these fish are so vital to a tank and keeping the tank clean. Now we think about plecos, we think about autocyclists, we think about those kinds of fish that keep the algae under control. But what about the bottom of our tanks that fish gets down, or fish food gets down into the gravel parts of it? And we're talking about a fish called the Cory that we're going to be looking at today and talking about how important they are to your tank, the different kinds that there are out there, whether they be the dwarf sizes or the full size. All of them do the same job basically, and they come in a wide varieties of color and just add beauty to your tank. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit today, and we're going to get to that right now. Yeah, Cory catfish or Corydoras are very, very popular freshwater fish. You can find them in just about any pet store. Corys are really hardy fish. They come in different sizes and are something that should be a staple in just about any fish tank that is a community tank, as they are fantastic cleaning fish. In other words, not if you're looking for these for algae, that is the wrong thing to be looking for them for. They don't do algae well. However, you can supplement their food in the tank with algae/protein tablets, which have enough in there to sustain them. But it's really, really important that you understand and not confuse these with plecos or autocyclists or something like that, because that's not what these fish are about. These fish are basically cleanup fish that go around and pick up the pieces of food that may reach the bottom of your tank and don't get readily eaten, so that it doesn't foul your tank up. And these guys are great at doing that. Like I said, they come in a ton of different colors and sizes, and they run the spectrum all the way from albino to leopard-like prints or spotted prints or panda sort of looking patterns on them. Like I said, they really run the gamut as to the types of colors that you're going to see with these fish, and also the sizes as well. Now, as I said earlier, you want to keep these in groups of no less than 3. If you don't have a tank big enough for that, you can keep 2 in a 5 or a 10 gallon, as long as you're not overpopulating the tank. You want to be careful not to do too much on your bio load that creates a problem to follow your water up. And of course, following up with regular water changes is so important with any fish tank, any tank, regardless of whether they have Corys or not, but especially with Corys, because they are, like I said, going to be cleaning up a lot of the waste in the bottom of your tank of food and stuff that might get to the bottom. But at the same time, they're gonna, they're gonna release feces and urine into the water just like any other fish. So you have to keep that in mind and understand that they are adding to the bio load, regardless of whether you think they're helping you clean the tank or not. So keep that in mind when you're getting these fish. Now, one of the other things that's important to note on these fish is that the Cory catfish is pretty effortless, but they also have to be looked at very carefully when you're making a purchase. There's a couple of different things that you want to look at. Number one, you want to look at their fins, both their tail fins and their dorsal fin, and those kind of areas, to make sure that they're not nipped up or rotting away or anything like that. That just means that whoever you're buying them from is not taking good care of their tanks. So you want to be careful to make sure that these fish are truly being kept in a good environment before you purchase them. Now, one of the main things that I'm going to tell you 2 things actually that are very important to these fish. If you look at their eyes and their eye area is sunken in around the head and that part of their body, then they're probably not very healthy fish, and I would avoid those if you can. I would just find a different supplier. Most places carry these. Try not to get them at the big box stores. They're not well cared for there, unfortunately. Try to find them at a local fish store that is really interested in making sure that their fish are healthy. Now, the other thing you want to look for on the Corys is the barbels that hang down on the very front of their mouths. These are very important to this fish because what they're basically used for is to move the substrate around and that sort of thing, to be digging for any food that might be down in that substrate. And if they're missing those or missing one of them, that can be a problem. So make sure before you leave the store with your purchase of these Corys or Corydoras that you see that they have both barbels on the front of their face and that none of them are missing, because that's going to be really, really important to whether or not these fish are healthy and are sustainable. The other thing you want to look for is any kind of diseases, of course. Corys and plecos and autocinquas don't often show ick on their bodies very readily because they are not a scaled fish. They are their body is more of a kind of a sandpapery type feeling body, and so it's harder to see ick on these fish. But if you look closely at their tail and their dorsal fin, if they do have an ick problem, that's usually going to be something that you can see real easy. So that's something you want to be careful of when you're buying Corys, that you do have that in mind. Now, one of the biggest things about the Cory catfish is their care is easy, as I said. It's very effortless, and you don't have to do much with them. They're very calm and peaceful and non-aggressive temperament type fish, so they should get along with just about any other fish in your tank that's a community fish. Sometimes they're shy or timid. Some species that are the dwarf type species, you'll think that they're gone or they're dead in your tank, and you come in with a flashlight at night and you look around and there they are, feeding off the bottom of your tank. So you want to make sure in the evenings, if you do have some algae slash protein tabs, that you are dropping a little bit of that into your tank before you go to shut your light off at night, and that way those fish, when they come out, have a food source if they are hiding during the day. Now, most Corys will not hide during the day, but some species do. And like I said, it's the dwarf species often that you'll find that are doing this, and you just have to know that you have to be really careful to make sure that you're getting some food to the bottom of that tank, so that those that are hiding, the species that are hiding, like I said, mostly the dwarf ones, are going to be looking for food, and they're not going to be able to get it unless you're supplying that to them in the evening when they're coming out. Now, that doesn't mean they're nocturnal. It has nothing to do with that. It's really they're just a little bit timid and shy of the other fish that are in your tank, and are just hiding away during the light hours. Sometimes turning the light down in your tank, if you have a tank that has plants in it that can handle a lower light situation, you can sometimes draw these fish back out during the daytime, and you'll see them running around your tank. Now, like I said, they're pretty straightforward fish. They're active, they're very curious, they're bottom dwellers, they're methodically scavenging the tank bottom, looking for food all the time. So they're just constant eaters and constant scavengers, and that's kind of what you want in a tank that is a community tank, because these guys are going to do a great job of keeping that tank clean and in need at all times. Like I said, though, remember that they do have a bio impact on your tank just like anything else, so be careful to make sure that you're doing regular water changes. Now, one of the things that you might want to watch for is it's kind of interesting how these Corys will school kind of like another fish, but you'll find them typically together doing different things like resting in the evenings. When they rest in the evenings, they're pretty much, you're going to see all of them together, maybe in one corner of your tank or something like that, even though they may look like they're not schooling during the day. You can see a little bit of that during the day, but in the evenings for sure, when you watch these fish rest, you're going to find that they are really going to spend a lot of time together at the bottom of your tank, sitting in a corner or a special spot that they've sort of picked out to go to in the evenings. And that's kind of fun to watch because it shows you the importance of having more than one of them. Now, like I said, I don't believe in keeping less than 2 of these. I prefer that you keep 3 or more. I would say 3 in a 10-gallon, 2 in a 5-gallon, but no less than that. And anything above that, you can start adding to the size of the school for your tank. Now, tank size, since we're talking about that, is really important. You want a covered tank. You don't want something that does have an open top on it because you will lose these fish. They are not jumpers per se, but they will go to the top looking for food, and often if your tank is high with water, right up to the edge of the top of the tank, these fish can be very active. They can, without intention, jump a little bit and get out of that tank, and you'll lose them. So you want to be careful to make sure that you have an aquarium that does have a top on it. 10-gallon aquariums are what I think would be the minimum. Like I said, I see them in 5-gallon tanks, but a 10-gallon tank is something that I would consider the minimum for a fish like this. But if you are going to put them in a 5 and you're doing a lot of water changes, which means you're doing a couple of water changes a week, these fish will do fine with 2 and a 5-gallon as long as your bio load is not heavy with other fish. They're great, like I said, as community fish, so you're going to find that they do well living amongst all the fish in your tank, and they're really going to be a calm and peaceful asset. Remember that all living species tax the bio load. That's just the way it is. It's important to be mindful of fish that count, and to be mindful of fish and count them, and make sure that you're not overstocking the tank. It's important to keep the tanks thoroughly covered because Corys often, like I said, dart to the surface and grab bites of food or gulp air. Hobbyists will often hear a snapping or popping sound at the top of the tank, and that's often either a Cory doing that or an angelfish, but they will break the water surface. So like I said, make sure that you do have a top on there, and a well oxygenated tank as well. So in other words, make sure your water flow is good, and movement along the top of the tank is so important to these fish because they get their oxygen that way. And if you see your fish going up gulping air at the top of the tank, not looking for food, that's different, but gulping air at the top of the tank, that's an indicator right there that your tank water is either not clean and doesn't have enough oxygen in it, or you need to get some kind of aeration in there to create an oxygenation environment that is going to help them. Do Cory school? Yes, like I said earlier, they do school together, but not in a traditional sense. But they will hang out with the catfish of their kind, and sometimes you will even find that if you have a mixture of different kinds of Corys in a large tank, they'll sometimes hang out together, but you'll mostly see them hanging out with the species that they are. And like I said, often you'll find them taking a break in a corner someplace or something like that, as long as they're well fed. But they're very active fish. Like I said, they're scavengers, so they're very active. Now, the size of a Cory depends a great deal on this type or species. They can go from anywhere from 2.5 inches in length, which is about the maximum of any Cory, down to as little as a half inch, which are some of the dwarf species that are out there. Now, the dwarf species are great for nano tanks, and you want to be careful to make sure that you understand that you are getting a dwarf species, because if you're not, and your supplier is not, like I said, the big box stores are not often aware of the type of fish that they have, and they may say something to you that is not quite accurate. So you got to be really careful to make sure that these fish are the size that you're wanting them to be as they grow. You want to say, look at them. Are they the size of a dime? Are they the size of a nickel? They get about those sizes, and beyond that, like I said, that's going to tell you a lot about the size of the fish and whether or not this is going to be a good fish for your particular community tank. Like I said, they're bottom dwellers, and it's good to keep at least 2 inches of gravel or substrate in the bottom of the tank. Now, every tank that I have typically has between 3 and 5 inches of substrate in the bottom, and is a gradual front to back incline. So as you get to the back of the tank, most of my substrate is going to be something where you're going to find that it gets deeper as you go to the back of the tank. That's just giving you a sense of depth. I don't want to get into escaping and how to do that or whatever. Whatever your situation is your situation, but you want to make sure that you've got at least, like I said, 2 inches of gravel or substrate in the bottom of the tank. I don't use any kind of gravel personally. Every tank that I have is a planted tank, because I just find that to be the healthiest for these fish or any other fish that you might be keeping. And I think it's really important to understand that that substrate really needs to be thick enough to where you can plant live plants, and you can also have enough of a substrate where these guys can scavenge around in there. Also decorative rocks, of course, places where a lot of food can hide from the other fish, but the Corys will find it. That's really, really important. And live plants are really important to these fish as well, because they do provide a cover for them and good hiding places for them to rest, and that includes rocks as well, with cave-like situations. Now, that territory is always prime real estate for any fish, so the Corys, you want to make sure that when you are putting Corys in your tank, if you can add a few more rocks to it that make areas that are new for the fish to hide in, or add a couple of new plants to the tank where they can hide under the plants, that's always a great idea. It's not necessary, but it's one way to kind of beat the system. Now, the water conditions in your tank are going to be the most important thing. You want a well-established tank that's been around and cycled for a long time, because these fish, as I said, can be very sensitive to water parameters and water quality. So you want a pH of around 7.0 to 7.8, a temperature anywhere from 72 to 78 degrees. I've seen fish do, these Corys do well up into the low 80s as far as temperature. The lighting, any standard community tank lighting will suffice for these guys. They're not particularly concerned about lighting. Like I said, some of the species will, however, if there's too much light, some of the smaller species will hide during the day and come out at night. But that's something they're probably going to do regardless of how low the light is. Like I said, you can try turning your lights down or dimming them periodically during the day to see these fish, but it doesn't mean that they're definitely going to come out. Poor water conditions is the main killer of these fish. High nitrites or ammonia put a lot of stress on Cory cats, and they're susceptible to disease at that point. You want to avoid excessively stirring up the tank bottom while cleaning. They can release a large amount of decaying organic matter into the water column and start a bacterial bloom. The same goes for rearranging decorations. Corydoras catfish may develop white patches around their mouths and barbels. This condition needs to be treated right away. If it's left untreated, the Corydoras catfish will stop eating, grow visibly thinner and thinner over time, and eventually die. So you want to make sure your water quality is ideal for these fish, so that you don't get a bacteria bloom in your tank that's going to cause these fish to have problems with their health. Now, diet and feeding. Cory catfish will eat basically any types of food, flakes or pellets that go to the bottom of the tank. Cory spend hours on end making their way across the tank bottom and poking around for food. Like I said, this is what they do. They'll go to the surface, they'll look for food if they can't find it at the bottom. And they're kind of diggers. Like I said, they use those barbels to sort of dig around in the bottom of the substrate. They're really good tank cleaners, as I said. This is basically one of the most important thing that you're getting these fish for, is to help you to keep these tanks clean. They're great looking fish as well, but their main purpose really is to keep that tank in 100% fantastic shape. And anyways, the Corys, like I said, they'll scavenge around for otherwise uneaten food, so that's really important to your tank. And diet can be mere just leftovers, basically, from what you're feeding your other fish. They don't really need anything that's a supplement. But if you are thinking that your Corys are not getting enough food from what's going to the bottom of the tank, and you can always use a algae/protein pellet, which they'll readily eat, and that will keep them in good shape. Just be careful not to overfeed your tank, because you can do that and cause a problem with a spike in ammonia or nitrites that are going to cause problems for the rest of the fish in your tank. So be really careful that you're not trying to pour a bunch of food in your tank that these fish are not going to be able to keep up with eating, and it's just going to sit in the bottom of your tank and follow the water up. So just be careful with that. Like any other fish, you want to put enough in there that they can scavenge around and eat within like a 5-minute period. Lifespan of the Corys are pretty much, I've seen them up to 5 years, but they can even live longer than that. I've seen some live as long as 7 years. So if you've got really good water parameters and you've got a really good community tank, these guys can live a long time. But the biggest, cause of these fish dying is from the fish store to your home, and the stress of being transported, or a shift in water parameters that is completely out of whack from the tanks that they were in at the store. You can ask your store if they can tell you a little bit about the tank that you got them out of, maybe a little bit about the pH in that tank, or also maybe the temperature, to see if they're compatible with what you're doing at home already. That's really all I've got to say. Like I said, they're a non-aggressive fish. They're friendly in nature. They're just a real asset to any tank, and a very, very peaceful fish. And like I said, they're very active and entertaining to watch. And if that's what you're looking for, if you add these in with maybe some shrimp and some snails and a small pleco. You can buy a pleco that's very tiny, and you can move it from tank to tank. Regardless of the size of your tank, you can get the plecos that are very small, and they will eventually outgrow your tank, but you can move them around to a larger tank, and or you can buy a dwarf species of pleco that will go along great with these guys. But if between the Corys, the plecos, the shrimp, and the snails, you should really, really, really have a great balance of cleaning devices in your tank, or cleaning assets in your tank that are going to keep your tank in absolutely pristine shape. Like I said, cover the tank because Corys will, uh, like I said, they will sometimes unintentionally get out of the top of the tank by jumping because they'll scan the tank up and down looking for food or just swimming around, and sometimes unintentionally they can get out and get loose. So anyways, that's about all I've got to say about Corys. There will be some footage that's added to this that I think you're going to enjoy of the Corys that I keep. I focused on this particular tank because these white Corys are, or albino Corys I should say, are easy to see, and you can see the activity of them against the dark substrate and the dark background. And I just thought I would focus on this particular tank for the footage of that, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you'll hit that like button, you'll hit the subscribe button, and of course you'll leave me comments if you have anything to add to this that I might have missed, or if you don't like what I said or you disagree with something that I said. I'm always happy to hear from you guys, and I'm really, really interested in that, and want you to know that I will get back to you as long as it's a question that I'm able to answer. If I can't answer it, I will certainly try to direct you someplace to where you will get that answer, and I know that that's important to you. So anyways, like I said, go out and get yourself some Corys or Corydoras. Like I said, they come in a zillion varieties. They're a fantastic fish to watch. I love them. They're great little guys for keeping your tank clean. And that's all I really need to talk about today. I hope that you will also hit that bell at the top so that anytime I have a new video coming out, you will be getting that video and be alerted to it, because we put out about one video a week, sometimes two, just depends on what's going on that week, but we try to at least get one video a week out, and we cover lots of different topics. So I hope you'll do that, and we'll talk again soon.